Hello, this is Caelan Huntress, and I like to play a lot of fun games on Zoom. And I've found that there's 4 different types of games that you can use Zoom to play. I'm going to share with you an excerpt from a recent digital engagement workshop that I taught, sharing with other people about how to play games and the different types of games that you can play. And so now I want to get into talking about the types of games. I'm going to go through this first section really quick so that we can get into playing, because that's really what we're here for, is to experience digital engagement. So the first type of game is a chat game. And those are the games that we played at the beginning when you first arrived. Easiest way to get engagement is, where in the world are you? Type it in the chat box. It gets people set in the momentum to use the chat box and to be interactive. Meetings continue how they begin. And so if you start by inviting interaction, it'll be easier for people to feel like they can participate. In addition to chat games, there's also grid games. And grid games are played in gallery view, where you have the Brady Bunch grid. And we're going to play a few of those games today. Then there's whiteboard games. And I had originally not planned to do whiteboard games today, but Flippity is down. And I had some Flippity games planned. And if you haven't heard, Flippity is on the outs with Google Sheets. It gets complicated and technical. I don't know why, but for the last week, we haven't been able to use Flippity. So there will be some whiteboard games today, but the star of the show is the apps games. And Rebecca, I totally understand what you mean. When you download the apps, sometimes they show in your sidebar and sometimes they don't. So apps are kind of glitchy, right? And the workshop that I was teaching last month was supposed to focus on Zoom apps. And so we did play some chat games and some grid games and some whiteboard games. I've got a list of all of these in my Zoom host checklist, which usually doesn't cover my face like that. But this Zoom host checklist, there's a link to get this in the description below. Come on, get the right size, man. Here we go. Okay, so this checklist, you can download this below, and there's a list of a bunch of different types of games in there. But if you're interested in Zoom apps and using them for games, then I'll share with you a brief overview of what the Zoom apps are and how you can facilitate those. So I'm going to spotlight myself, which is going to take you out of gallery view and put me big into speaker view, because there's a couple of things that I'd like to talk about with launching apps here with my fancy green screen. And apps are best installed in advance, because if you take time during the meeting to try and install these apps, or if your participants are taking the time to do it, it's taking time away from engagement. And the engagement happens in the activity. It doesn't happen in the troubleshooting. But the difficulty with apps is that you have to be signed in to the same account in the browser as you are in your app. So if you happen to use a different browser Zoom account than your application Zoom account, you might share with a co-producer or with an assistant. It can cause all sorts of difficulties. And you can't install an app in only one of them. When you install an app in the Zoom app, then it's going to take you over to the browser to authenticate and say, hey, do you really want to grant these permissions? And you have to say yes in the browser, and then it's going to kick you back over. Some of the apps actually need you signed in to both in order to work. Kahoot, in particular, is one of these, where if you try and launch it in Zoom, even if you have it installed and you've used it before, and you say, hey, I want to launch a Kahoot as the host, it's going to kick you back over to the browser and try and get an authentication while you're signed in there, and then bring it back over. And these integrations are not great. It's the early days, so they're glitchy. And so the best practice that you can use in running an app is to send and then share. When you open an app and you launch an app, you get this window. And it gives you 3 options: to share, send, and expand. Sharing is how you share your screen, and it basically treats the app window like a shared screen, as if you were sharing a whiteboard or an application window. But sending is what sends it out to the participants. And it gives you a drop down, and you can choose, I'm going to send it to everyone, or I'm going to select specific participants. I haven't bothered with that. I don't know what use case there would be where that's valuable. But I have found that you have to share it again and again and again in order for people to get it. Because anytime you change the setup of the app, for some reason, those changes don't show in what you shared before. And so your chat box is going to be filled with these notifications. The most recent is the one that you want to share. But there's this extra difficulty where some of your participants, if they use a different Zoom account in the browser than in the app, then it's going to get this pop-up window. All in all, apps are a mess. I just recommend against them until they figure out how to use them. So in the meantime, I recommend that you stick with chat games, grid games, and whiteboard games. And I've got a bunch of these listed in my Zoom host checklist. You can subscribe to my newsletter at the link below and get this checklist for free. There's a whole bunch of great games and exercises that you can use in your own Zoom meetings to increase engagement and have fun, because that's really what it's all about. If we're going to spend time together in a Zoom grid, let's at least have a good time doing it. Have fun out there.